This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech.
Henry Wolfond has looked to the stars since he was a young child.
In fact, after following the space program by NASA closely, he set his heart to one day going to space himself.
But when Henry, also known as Hank, did finally strap into a rocket ship, he did it with all of humanity on his mind.
As a child, from that early age, I had this fantasy about going to space. It was a real bond my father and I had around the space program. Apollo 8 was making the first orbital mission of the moon. And I remember standing on the beach at night, looking up with my dad at the full moon and him saying, you know, just think about it. There are 3 men on the other side of the moon right now. And I never stopped pursuing that passion.
Well, a Canadian is going to be on board the next Blue Origin mission, the 9th as part of its New Shepard program, and among the 43 people flying above the boundary that is officially recognized as space. And not only are you going to sort of pursue your passion, but you're bringing a lot of what you're passionate about.
I'm very involved with the Jewish community. I'm very involved with the fight against anti-Semitism. And after October 7th and the horrific attack by Hamas, it really set me back. And what was shocking was how that unleashed not sympathy for the Jewish people, but a torrent of anti-Semitism that we're seeing worldwide. This gave me an opportunity to look at the Earth, as William Shatner said, the thin boundary of atmosphere that protects us, and the fact that we're all humanity here. We're all in this together on this fragile planet, and there shouldn't be room for intolerance and hate. And that's something, a message that I hope to convey and ask others to stand up and speak out against.
I'm just super excited because he's been waiting for this. I mean, you could say all his life. I have just the utmost respect for him. The fact that he has made this not just about himself, but about fighting anti-Semitism. I'm just so proud of him.
Welcome everybody to New Shepard's 9th human flight. It's another great day to fly to space.
This crew today includes Hank Wolfond, Chairman and CEO of Bayshore Capital.
I think space is going to be incredible. I wanted to be an astronaut growing up, and here we are, 2024, and I'm going outer space.
T-10, go to proceed. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, command engine start. 2, 1, ignition.
News tower and is heading to space.
This is awesome.
DE3 engine relight.
And touchdown.
It's perspective that adds to the mission that I'm on to combat hate and anti-Semitism, and seeing the world from up that high where you don't see the borders, you don't see the divisions, you don't see all of the lines that divide us. We're all one people. We're on this very fragile, small planet. It's amazing.
Well, welcome to Believe in People, Henry.
Amy?
We can't think of a better way of bringing in 2025 than to have you as our guest, Henry, or I should say Hank, because you are sharing your experience from the vantage point of being 107 kilometers above the Earth. And so at the start of this podcast, we played an introduction clip where you were so kindly gave us that introduction piece. And you spoke of your lifelong fascination with space travel. Can you tell us how your experience in space has shifted your perspective?
It certainly was a profound experience and exceeded my expectation of what it would be, but I paired myself with the perspective of seeing the planet from a distance, which 107 kilometers, while it sounds far in one sense, is relatively close in terms of space terms.
But could you see Earth? Could you see the full?
You can't see the entire planet, but you can certainly see a horizon that's probably 11 or 1200 kilometers distant. So it's um, a perspective beyond what you can see from a plane or what you can see from anything that most people get to experience. You see the thin layer of atmosphere, which is surprisingly thin because as a pilot, I regularly fly in the altitudes above 40,000 feet at 41, 43, or 45,000 feet, which seems pretty high. But when you're at 350 plus thousand feet, you're beyond. You're in the blackness of space. It's an indescribable blackness. It's like translucent and infinite. You don't see stars because it's daytime and the Earth is a big light polluter when the sun is reflecting off of it. So it's quite moving and quite intense, partly because it's such a quick trip out and back that you almost don't have a chance to catch your breath, so to speak. The adrenaline is just pumping, and emotions are just colliding in your brain.
Now how did you go? Who took you there? Can I go? How do you figure this out?
Blue Origin was the provider of this. That's Jeff Bezos's
Yeah.
company. And I was inspired to go on Blue Origin after seeing William Shatner at the age of 90 do this same journey in 2021, October of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I started the process of making inquiries. I'm not allowed to discuss what the cost was. It's not insignificant, but not insurmountable if you've had the good fortune to uh, be able to afford it. So started the process, started the conversation in 2021, signed a contract in early 2022, and then a little over 2.5 years later was able to go.
Wow. Wow, it took that long?
I mean, they had a hiatus in their missions because they had a mishap on an unmanned flight in, I think it was September of 2022. So originally, I should have gone in the latter part of 2022, and then by the time they dealt with the issues that they encountered there and got clearance from the FAA to fly people again, it was a couple of years.
Actually, because if you think about it, I mean, this isn't a safe flight, really. I mean, were you nervous? I saw you, you walked through, rang the bell. What were you thinking when you rang that and went onto the craft?
It becomes a reality as you kind of see that you're going to step into this capsule about a little more than a half an hour before it actually launches and you strap in. Yeah, it does become real. I mean, you're sitting on 100-ton rocket ship. You could say it's a bomb. More than half of that weight is a volatile mixture of hydrogen, liquid oxygen, the propellant that's going to take you to 107 kilometers above the planet. So it's I guess where I was, it wasn't fear. I was just, I had two of my children and two of my grandchildren were there watching, and I'm thinking, okay, I hope this doesn't fuck up
No
because
kidding.
they will have lifelong trauma. But it's I there's a level of excitement, as I said. The adrenaline is certainly building up as you're watching the countdown, and then in those final seconds, it's like a rush. You accelerate from zero on the launch pad to something like 4,000 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
Uh, um, and you're in space in under 3 minutes. You've gone from kind of this light and blue into the blackness of space in a very short period of time. You spend about 4 minutes. You unharness, you get out of your harness, you float around in the capsule, and you spend about 4 minutes in weightlessness in outer space, and then you come back down again, and the entire journey is is about 11 minutes.
Wow. Well, look at
So
this. Kevin is holding something, one giant leap for mankind. Where the heck did you get that, Kevin?
the one giant leap for mankind. Oh, wow. So, Kevin, I got to tell you, in my grade eight, I was born in 1958. So when was grade eight? 1970 or 71 for me. I did my speech on the Apollo 11 mission, and my mother had collected the Globe and Mail headline that had the green print, Man on the Moon, and all of these headlines and stuff. So, in preparing for that speech, he cut out all of the quotes that I wanted to use for that. So I had all of that memorabilia from there, and it's like I still lament. It's like shit. I destroyed all that great stuff. Time magazine cover, Newsweek, New York Times, Globe and Mail headlines because I was creating this speech out of it. But it reminds me that yeah, that growing up in the 1960s, I was hugely connected and just couldn't get enough of the space race, the race to the moon, and every single mission. When you held that up, a variation of that line as I intertwined this experience, which was the fulfillment of a childhood dream with um, the work that I'm doing in the Jewish community and combating anti-Semitism. So I turned things around and said, this is one giant leap for me and hopefully one small step towards combating anti-Semitism or turning
Yeah, and
the
actually
tide on hate.
to that point, Henry, and this is really important. You're on a mission. You weren't only on a mission to experience outer space, so to speak, but also to combat anti-Semitism and hate in general. First of all, how? I mean, clearly, I understand how that led to what you're doing, but could you share a little bit more of your insights around this, what you're doing, and how? Like, how? What are we going to do about this?
Interestingly enough, in 2021, when I thought to myself, this would be something I'd really like to do. It will be an experience of a lifetime, which it was. I wasn't thinking about anti-Semitism in 2021 while it was there and while these issues were coming up. It certainly was not at the level of intensity that it's become subsequent to October 7th, 2023. After October 7th, 2023, I assumed a role in the Toronto Jewish community as chair of the Confronting Anti-Semitism Committee with UJA Federation, and as it led to a convergence of these two things. My first thought was, geez, is this something I should even be doing given the crisis that our community is facing? And then it occurred to me that while in ordinary times prior to October 7th, I probably would have wanted to be as anonymous as possible about this. This would have been my own personal thing. I wouldn't want to, be seeking any publicity out of it. But given everything that was going on, and having read a lot, Carl Sagan and Chris Hadfield's this whole perspective that the further you get away from the planet, the more you realize that this is it. This is all we've got, and we should be cooperating. And as I did an opinion piece in the Toronto Star. I don't know if you read it. But I talk about in the 1970s, at the height of the Cold War, the Russians and the Americans cooperated on the Soyuz project. And, if you just have a few people and each of them have a role and everyone's survival is dependent on each other person doing what they're supposed to do, and that nobody would survive if they don't, you realize that, hate, while it's probably unavoidable and inevitable, and it's persisted throughout the entire history of human civilization going back hundreds of thousands of years, it is something that we should recognize as abhorrent to us as a species, us as a society. And to answer the question, how do we fight it? I think it's a matter of educating people, which is really hard to do in this age where people have free reign on social media to proliferate lies and conspiracy theories and really amplify the kind of memes that have persisted for hundreds, thousands of years about the Jewish people. We're in control of everything, blood libels and all kinds of conspiracies, and these things are taking hold, and it's very hard to convey that this is false, and the truth is that we as the Jewish people are being blamed for all of the world's ills, when in fact we're truly the victims of this kind of hate. It's interesting because I don't know if you want to ask a question, because it occurs to me like there's irony in this, and I'm sure our stories are similar. Like our ancestors, my grandparents, didn't wake up one day and say, things in the Ukraine, I just think there's better opportunities elsewhere where we don't know the language, and we're going to go there with no money in our pockets. It's like we, as the Jewish people, came here because of rampant anti-Semitism. In my father-in-law's case, he fortunately survived the Holocaust, but most, if not all, the Jewish people who are here because of anti-Semitism. So there's kind of an irony in that I'm lucky to be here. I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to have taken this journey. But enmeshed in that is the kind of hatred that I'm fighting against today, and trying to call out. So
well, look, we live in very polarized times. I think that it's no surprise that many societies, Eastern European societies, are heading in a far right direction. In the United States, where I live, you can see that the way people voted in the last election is, a stand for conservatism. I don't know what's going to happen in Canadian elections in the near future, but there's one coming. But I do want to ask you this, and that is, and I think I need to ask you this, and that is, do you connect anti-Semitism with what is going on in Israel and Gaza today?
I think the the connection is certainly there, and it's hard. Of course, I sympathize with the plight of the Gazan people, but you have to recognize that what precipitated the events of October 7th is the same underlying anti-Semitism that we're talking about. The mandate and the original Hamas charter calls for the murder of Jews, specifically Jews, not Israelis. This is a consequence of an education system and an ideology and an Islamist fundamentalist government that spent billions of dollars in anticipation of sparking this conflict that started on October 7th with tunnels, with thousands of rockets that were continuously bombarding Israel and drawing Israel into a conflict where the militants and the leaders of Hamas are safe underground. There are no bomb shelters for the civilian population. And, I don't want to get into arguing for the specific policy decisions that leaders in Israel are making, but it's important to recognize that this did start on October 7th. When people say this didn't start on October 7th, it absolutely did. And there was no devastation in Gaza prior to October 7th. You can talk about what the living conditions were, but certainly was nothing compared to what's happened subsequently. But yeah, it is connected. The anti-Semitism is connected to what's happening in Gaza. And what I was saying before is it's being used in social media and by the people who are influencing and promoting these protests, which not only are calling for peace and self-determination of the Gazan people, but are also calling for violence and death against the Jews. Even looking at recent events in Australia, I remember early on, they were actually chanting in these protests, "Gas the Jews." So it's used as a justification for anti-Semitism, but again, I think it's partly fueled by anti-Semitism and anti-Semites wanting to seize this as a justification. What does shooting at a Jewish school in Toronto or burning a synagogue in Montreal have to do with advancing the independence movement for the Palestinian people? You're attacking Jewish institutions, you're threatening Jewish lives. In Canada, in North America, is that going to solve the problem in the Middle East?
No,
No.
because that is abhorrent, and I would agree with that. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to a friend yesterday who told me that a menorah had been vandalized here in Chicago, not far from where they lived, and it was a thing of beauty, and that it was destroyed. And those things that is abhorrent, as I just said. But now I have to ask you, when you look at this planet from up above, and you can't see us because we're so small and perhaps insignificant from a distance, how in heaven's name did we get to this point? Can't we? Isn't it funny? Can't we see?
Sometimes it's hard to just to go directly to the forest for the trees.
Mhm.
The closer you are to something, the harder it is to see. We're talking about the politics in the US and the ideologies. I don't know if it's conservatism or this new
No, and I
um,
certainly wasn't. I certainly
brand of
didn't.
politics
Yeah,
that
I
that
certainly didn't
that
want to suggest that
that
it was conservatism. I was just saying that the authoritarianism
Mhm.
seems to be on the rise. I'm not even, and that I guess that's what I shouldn't have used the word conservatism. I should have
Yeah.
used something else. But you're right.
It's, as you said, when you go out to space, you don't see people, you don't see boundaries, you don't see frontiers. You see this planet, you see that it's protected by a very relatively thin layer of atmosphere. And the further you go, if you read Carl Sagan's book, The Pale Blue Dot, the entire planet is insignificant. There are trillions of billions of stars and quadrillion orbs circling all of those stars in this vast universe. Uh, so our entire planet and existence in that context is insignificant. We're all insignificant, and
Hmm.
Yeah.
it's a hard. But the closer you get, and when you come into our own being, we're significant.
Hmm.
What we're doing is significant. Our life is significant to us, to our families. So it's almost like you have to get further away to see that
What to get perspective.
Yeah.
we're on this tiny planet, this tiny insignificant planet together as a species, as humanity, and we all should be doing everything we can to protect it and to cooperate and to um, fight against hate,
Yeah.
I
And
think.
and Henry, what I don't know, maybe this is a stretch, but what lessons from your journey into space do you feel are applicable to kind of addressing prejudice and fostering peace here on Earth?
This is not, we're on a small planet. We, each of us, are going to be here for a short period of time. Do we want to take responsibility for caring for each other, for protecting the planet, or do we just want to fight for our ideologies and our beliefs and kill each other in the process and destroy the planet as part of that? I mean, I don't want to get too um, flaky in describing it. I'm one
I hear you.
person. I had a profoundly moving experience, and it's given me the opportunity to call attention to the things we've just talked
Yeah.
about.
Can I ask, just because our time is almost up, but we've talked about your experience in space, and you mentioned William Shatner, and of course, I grabbed my Toronto Telegram front page that I have saved from all those years from Man on the Moon,
Mm.
One Small Step. As a matter of fact, I was just at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry over the Christmas holidays, and they have the lem in there,
Wow. Okay.
it's not the lem that landed on the moon, but they have actually a couple of
Mm.
Apollo rockets there,
Cool.
and it's William Shatner, uh, Space: The Final Frontier. In closing, can I ask you, do you think that space is the final frontier? Or in listening to our conversation today, it's almost as if we are the final frontier, and perhaps we need to start exploring ourselves a little more closely.
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I am very excited by the momentum that space science and space exploration has taken over the last really within the last decade with SpaceX, with Blue Origin, with Axiom, and all of the initiatives that are going on, the number of uh, launches that are taking place, and the advancements in technology and reusability, and the fact that after 50 more than 50 years, we're finally getting back to going to the moon. Like, I assume we're pretty close in age. I'm 66.
Yeah.
You might be a year or two younger.
Older.
But in 1968, when Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey came out, I thought, well, I'm going to be 42 and I'm going to get on a Pan Am spacecraft that will fly me to a space station in 2001, and then I'll be able to go onto the moon. But that faded after the Apollo 17, the final landing on the moon in the early 1970s, 71 or 72. But it's now looking like that's going to happen, like probably or likely within the next 5 years. People will be traveling back to the moon, and infrastructure will likely be created there, and large space stations will be created. Blue Origin's orbital reef is a massive project that's been envisioned, and Elon Musk has committed to missions to Mars within the next 5 or 10 years. So, is space the final frontier? Do I see us going beyond this solar system to other planets? Not likely. Like, if you think of the closest star to Earth, Proxima Centauri, part of the Alpha Centauri constellation, it's 4.25, 4.5 light years away. At 1 million miles an hour, which is 4 or 5 times faster than spacecraft can go, and if there's a propellant that could accelerate a rocket to that speed, that gradually enough that people could survive it, it would take 2,800 years to get there, about 25 trillion miles. So is there going to be some other concept of folding space and things that are well beyond my ability to comprehend? I don't know, but within our lifetime, yeah, we'll probably get to the planet Mars. Will that be a life raft for the planet or civilization of probably 10 billion people over the next 40, 50 years? I, Unlikely. So I think in practical terms, certainly within the span of our lifetime and over the next hundreds of years, I think this is it. This is all we got, is planet Earth. So again, I think it. I would hope that things will turn around, and we'll get back to more peaceful coexistence and cooperation.
Yeah. And I think and this is so appropriate as we come to our end of our podcast. But Henry, you've had an experience and a perspective that is, a handful of people really get to experience. It's really remarkable. And I think too that it gives you, I mean, it does foster this need for looking at humanity and peace and really combating hatred. And I think too there is an optimism here as well, in the belief of people. I'm going to ask you that question: is why do you believe in people? Because I see now, especially our Jewish community, is people are reaching out and actually talking about it and really having those tough conversations. And we need to do more of that, create further awareness.
Well, we need to create further awareness. We need more people to speak out on our behalf. There's lots of organizations in Canada. There's something called Allies for a Strong Canada. Theallies.ca is the website, which has leaders outside of the Jewish community who are speaking out against anti-Semitism. Hopefully these are people who will influence others to stand up against this kind of hatred. In terms of the perspective I've gained when I was talking about like the advancement in space travel, if you look at what SpaceX has done with now recapturing, they're talking about reducing the cost by something like 99%, that over the next decade, the cost of per pound of payload to get it into space will be about 1% of what it costs now or over the past 3 to 5 years. And I think that will give more and more people the opportunity to experience what I experienced. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the early days of aviation where only wealthy people could afford to do it, and it wasn't really that safe. And now today, anyone can get on a plane for $1,000 and fly to Europe. So my hope is that millions of people will get to off the planet within my lifetime, certainly within my children's or grandchildren's. And the more people that are able to gain that perspective, maybe the more realization will
Get
come
it.
to society.
Yeah, that's well said.
Henry Hank. Well,
You
Hank, I
could
love
just
it.
call me
I love
Hank.
it. I
Hank.
love
you.
Hank.
My
That is
friends call
awesome.
me Hank. I don't
I
know.
like-
I just
That's cool. That's cool.
Thank you for joining us on Believe in
Thanks.
People, and good luck with every mission you get involved in. Thank you.
Thanks very
Thanks,
much,
Hank.
Amy. Thanks,
Thanks a
Kevin.
lot.
Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Well, I wish him well on his continued journey. Space, the final frontier. But we've got a lot of work to do down here on this planet too. And it's very refreshing to hear someone acknowledge that and say that, yes, we do have to look within ourselves as well. We can explore all we want, but we've got to explore the human heart as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the fact that he's coming from this from a completely different perspective, one that's unique, and he had that opportunity to, go into space is remarkable. And he's come back even more on purpose than he did when he left. So that
Awesome.
was pretty profound. And if you've felt that you also too had a good experience here listening on Believe in People with Hank, then please subscribe to Believe in People, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.